This is Connect with Skip Heitzig. Glad to have you join us today for this time of Bible teaching with Skip. Our topic today is learning to relax from our Hustle and Grind series. If ever there was a commandment tailor-made for the overcommitted and overworked, this is it. Here, God gives His people an order to rest and relax. It's pretty amazing that we serve a God who put this on His top 10 list of important things. Today and next time, we will consider what it means to rest and why it is good to do so. We'll see why rest is essential to our worship. Let's turn to Exodus chapter 20, and we will begin in verse 8 as we learn to relax.
We are right in the middle of a series called Hustle and Grind, series on work, and we're kind of right in the midst of that. We have just a couple more weeks to go on it. But I want to talk to you about what happens, what should happen after you work hard, and that is resting. It's a message called Learning to Relax. So we're going to be in Exodus chapter 20. We're going to begin in verse 8 in just a little bit. I want to begin by showing you the front page of an owner's manual, vehicle owner's manual, and what it says. It says regular maintenance is, by the way, before we read this, how many of you have read all the way through the owner's manual in your vehicle? You've read it all the way through. Yeah, mostly a couple guys. You're so hardcore if you read all the way through it. Most people don't do that, by the way. But my owner's manual front page says regular maintenance is essential to obtaining the highest level of performance, safety, and reliability from your vehicle. This booklet is designed to help you make sure your vehicle receives proper and timely maintenance. Follow this booklet's recommendation and you'll enjoy maximum reliability and peace of mind for many years to come. What a promise! Peace of mind for years to come. Well, that's the owner's manual to a car. This book is designed to help your life run right and give you peace of mind for years to come. This is the book you should read all the way through. Whether you've read the owner's manual of your car or not, I don't care. But this I care about. And this is the owner's manual to our life. And God gave the Bible to us so that we would have proper maintenance. Just like an owner's manual to a vehicle talks all about the maintenance you need, this book, the Bible, talks about our maintenance and promises peace of mind. So I've had you turn to Exodus chapter 20. It happens to be the very first record in Scripture of what we know as the 10 Commandments. And we, in particular, want to notice the fourth commandment, because the fourth commandment is about timely and proper maintenance for our unit, for us, for our lives. Of the 10 commandments, the commandment we want to look at for the Sabbath or to rest, of the 10 commandments, this is the tender commandment. This is God's tender way of caring for you and showing you that He cares. It will bring you peace. Now, even before we read it, you probably know, but I'll refresh your memory, that the 10 commandments are part of, or were part of, a covenant that God made with the children of Israel in the Old Testament on Mount Sinai when He delivered them from Egypt. They had been slaves in Egypt for 400 years. God sent them Moses, a deliverer. Moses brought them from Egypt, crossed the Red Sea, took them out into the wilderness. 3 months after they left Egypt, crossed the Red Sea, were out in the desert. 3 months later, they rendezvoused at a particular mountain we know as Mount Sinai, and God established His covenant with His people by giving them 2 tablets of the law. We know that as the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments, the Hebrews call it Aseret HaDevarim, which literally means a decade of words. A decade of words. Or, simply put, they would call it the 10 words Or let's call it God's top 10 list. And God's top 10 list, or the 10 words, the 10 commandments, cover all the basics of life. A few things to note about these 10 commandments. They are commandments. They are commandments. They are not 10 suggestions. They are not 10 proposals. They are not 10 really good ideas. They are 10 commandments. Something else. There are 10. Not 5. Not 9. It's like, yeah, I don't like that one, so I'm going to throw that out. No, there are 10 of them. But there's also not 19 of them. I bring that up because the rabbis, after this was given, much after this was given, the rabbis counted 613 commandments. And of those 613 commandments, 248 were positive commandments, things you should do. 365 of them were negative commandments, things that you shouldn't do. But aren't you glad God gave 10? Not 613, he gave 10. And this is the fourth of the 10 commandments. Something else that I think you should notice is that it is the first of 2 positive commandments. You know, most of the commandments say, don't do this, don't do that, and don't do that other thing. But there are 2 commandments that are positive commandments, and that is the 4th and 5th commandment, and this is the first of the 2 positive commandments. Now, we're going to take this commandment a little bit slowly. We think it's very important. So what we want to do is look at Exodus 20 this week, but look at also this commandment, but in another listing given by Moses as he reviews it before his death on Mount Nebo in Deuteronomy chapter 5 next time we gather together. We want to begin in verse 8 and read down to verse 11. That's what we're going to be covering. But let me just say this as introductory material as well. No other commandment of the 10 commandments has breeded more controversy than the commandment to keep the Sabbath. Whole church movements have been created over this commandment. Christians are sometimes, by certain groups, accused of breaking this commandment because they meet on Sunday rather than Saturday. And really hardcore groups will go so far as to say Sunday worship is the mark of the beast. So if you worship God on Sunday, that's akin to the mark of the beast as outlined in Revelation chapter 13. Crazy, huh? But true. I also want to remind you that the 10 commandments are 2 tables of the law. And the way it's typically divided is pretty simple. The first 4 are about your relationship to God. The second 6 are about your relationship to each other. And why is that important? Because it shows us that the Sabbath, which is part of the first listing, our relationship to God, the Sabbath isn't just a pause from work, but it's a part of worship. It's a part of worship. So the first commandment is you should worship the right God. You will have no other gods before you besides him. The second commandment is you should worship the right God in the right manner. You will have no graven images when you worship him. The third commandment is that you honor his name. You don't take his name in vain. And this commandment, the fourth commandment, is that you devote a whole day to be occupied with him. So there are 4 words that sum up this fourth commandment, and that gives us our outline. Here's the 4 words: rest, remembrance, responsibility, and reason. Rest, remembrance, responsibility, and reason. Let's begin with the first, rest. Resting is commanded. Now let's read through the entire commandment, verse 8. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the 7th day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall do no work, you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male servant, nor your female servant, nor your cattle. Your pets get a day off. Nor your stranger who is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath and hallowed it. So don't you find it interesting just right off the bat that resting is commanded? It's a command. It's an order. It's not a suggestion. God gives an order, a rule, a decree. It's as if he said, relax, and that's an order. Take a vacation from your vocation, and that's an order. It is a rule. Here's the question, why? Why would we ever need a command to rest? Here's my take on it. I think God really understands human nature. And I think he knows that we need a command. Because, I say that, because breaking the Sabbath is the only commandment that some people actually brag about violating. You hear it in their conversations when they say, I haven't taken a day off for 4 years. I mean, that's something to be proud of. Or vacation, what's that? So what you need to see is this commandment, this rule, this decree of God is the longest of any of the 10 commandments. That is, the commandment is given, but then there's more supplemental material to explain this commandment than any of the other 9 commandments. There are 98 words altogether devoted to the 4th commandment. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Now let me, in this study especially, kind of give you groundwork, because we're going to build on it next time, because we're going to continue this, but take a different look at it. The word Sabbath, in Hebrew Shabbat, appears in the Old Testament 90 times. 90 times. In the New Testament, 55 times. So about 145 times the word Sabbath or Shabbat appears in the Bible. It simply means to cease or to desist or to put to an end. So the idea of a Sabbath is it puts to end all of the work that you did during the week. By the way, 54 times in Scripture, it is simply referred to as the 7th day. So I'll be a little technical, because some people say, well, I'm taking my Sabbath today. Okay, that's okay, but technically it is the 7th day, and the 7th day in Judaism doesn't begin Saturday morning. It begins Friday night at sundown and goes through Saturday and ends at sundown Saturday evening. So technically, from our perspective, Sabbath would be over on Saturday night, and it would already be Sunday. Now, where did it come from? It came from creation, and we'll get into that in just a minute. So the pattern of Shabbat, or ceasing work, stopping work, goes before the law all the way back to creation, when God had a work week that lasted 6 days. He made the heavens and the earth, and on the 7th day, he rested. But I want to press this a little bit further. In the Bible, the Sabbath is far more than Saturday. It's far more than just a weekly day. In the Bible, there are feast days that had prescribed Sabbath rests attached to them, whether it was Saturday or not. So, for example, in Leviticus chapter 23, it outlines the different festivals of Israel. And on the Feast of Trumpets, it says this: on the first day of the 7th month, you shall have a Sabbath. It's a special day attached to the feast, a day of rest. Also the Feast of Tabernacles. The feast shall be kept for 7 days, but on the first day it shall be a Sabbath, and on the 8th day there shall be a Sabbath. So there are weekly Sabbaths, Saturday we would call it, Friday sundown to Saturday sundown. Then there are days attached to festivals, also called Sabbaths. But also, Sabbaths are far more than just days of the week. Sometimes Sabbaths are referred to as an entire, get this, year. A year where people were commanded by God to take a year off. Now, I know some of you are going, you're talking my language. We've actually already had that. It's called COVID. But in Leviticus 25, the land was cultivated for 6 years. On the 7th year after that, God commanded them agriculturally to let the land rest. Let it rest so that the soil would not deplete. It was a method of conservation for the soil. Also, it was to remind them that the land doesn't belong to them, it belongs to God and not to any one person. Now, why am I telling you all this? I'm giving you this information because sometimes you'll meet people who pride themselves in being Sabbath keepers. I keep the Sabbath. I'm not like you Christians who meet on Sunday. I actually keep the Sabbath. If you ever have that conversation, you might have a little fun with them and say, do you really keep the Sabbath? So you're telling me every 7 years you take a year off and trust God for whatever comes in that year? Because that is the Old Testament Sabbath. And if they go, oh, well, that really wasn't all that important. Well, to God, it was pretty important. In fact, he took it so seriously, he sent the whole nation into captivity for 70 years because they hadn't kept the sabbatic year for 490 years. That's 70 Sabbath years. And at the very end of 2 Chronicles chapter 36, God says this, therefore he, God, brought against them the king of the Chaldeans, that is the Babylonians. They burned the house of God. They broke down the wall of Jerusalem, burned all of its palaces with fire, and those who escaped from the sword he carried away to Babylon to fulfill the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah until the land had enjoyed her Sabbaths. As long as she lay desolate, she kept the Sabbath to fulfill 70 years. I share all of this simply to say two fine points need to be added. First, God takes rest seriously. God takes rest seriously. And second, if you happen to boast because you're a Sabbatarian and you don't worship on Sunday, if you are tending toward legalism, I would just press that and say, I don't really think you're living according to the Old Testament biblical idea of Sabbatarianism. Just saying. Just saying. So rest is commanded. But let's go on. After rest is to remember. Resting is commanded, remembering is clarified. So let's go down to verse 9 and notice something. 6 days you shall labor. Now he delineates the commandment. He's adding supplemental material. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall do no work. You nor your son, daughter, male servant, female servant, cattle, stranger that is within your gates. So the previous verse says, remember the Sabbath. Remember the Sabbath. Now what does that mean, remember the Sabbath? Just sit around and think about it? Oh yeah, I remember it. It's Saturday. That you recall it? Well, Deuteronomy 5 that we're going to look at next week renders it a little bit differently. It doesn't say remember, it says observe it. Observe it. So sometimes the word remember means to call something to mind in order that you may do something about what you call to mind. That's the idea of remembering. Call something to mind, recall it, think about it so that you do something about it. Here's an example. When Joseph was in prison and he interprets the dreams of a couple of prison mates, he tells one of them, because he knows he's going to be released, he says, remember me when you are released before Pharaoh and get me out of here. I want you to call to mind this conversation so that you can spring me from jail because I want to get out. So to remember the Sabbath, it's a very strong positive command. In Hebrew, it's called an infinite absolute. That is, it's a very emphatic command. It means to recall and ponder so that you will elicit the proper response. What is the proper response, you ask? Notice verse 8. Remember the Sabbath to keep it what? holy. That's the response you are to have. You are to remember so that you will keep it holy. That is, you will treat this day as different from all the other days. So simply set a day apart for me to do whatever I, the Lord, want you to do. I want you to use a day of your week to focus on me. It's part of your worship. Part of your worship. How many married couples do we have here tonight? I can't ask this on home. So you're married, okay? Keep your hands up. Keep your hands up. If you're married, keep your hands up. Okay. How many of you, with your hands up, have regular date nights? Continue to keep your hand up. If not, just put your hand down. Okay, so we need to work on that, don't we? Right? So when you have a date night, I don't want to shame anybody about that, but if you do have a date night, what you're telling your spouse is, I'm going to remember that you are so important that this is all about you and me. This is about our relationship together. That's what date night's about. I'm remembering that. I'm doing something. It's holy. It's for us. When our son Nate was a young child, my wife came up with this idea just out of the blue. She called it an I Love Nathan Day. And it was a day where she would pick him up from school, and it was just, you know what? You decide what we're going to eat. You decide what store we're going to go to. You decide what activity. And it wasn't based on anything. It was just out of grace. This is an I Love Nathan Day. Think of the Sabbath as an I Love God Day. An I Love God Day. You're going to do the activities God likes. You're going to consider the relationship you have with Him. Back in 1924, not that I would remember from personal experience, but there were Olympics in which somebody very famous ran named Eric Liddell. Chariots of Fire was based on his story. Eric Liddell, his best event was the 100-meter run. The problem is that during that year of the Olympics, all of the heats for the runs were on Sunday. Eric Liddell, as a strong Christian, would not participate. And while they were running the heats, he was in church preaching sermons. So a few days later, he decided he would run the 400-meter. Now, he wasn't trained for that, and everybody who knew about this did not give him a chance that he would win. They thought, oh, he'll never win. Not only did he do well, he got the gold medal. Not only did he get the gold medal, he broke a new world record for that year. And the way he describes it is that God was honoring him for honoring God. God was honoring him for honoring God. Now, I'm conflating a couple things. I'm talking about Sunday versus the Shabbat, the Jewish Sabbath, but I'm going to work my way to that. So the Sabbath idea is it's a day where God is honored and a day where men and women get recharged, both together. Now, what's strange about that is you would never know the Sabbath was designed for that purpose when you get to the New Testament. Because by the time you get to the New Testament, the Sabbath had become a wearisome burden to keep. It was a labor to keep the Sabbath. I'll remind you of what Jesus said about the religious leaders, the scribes and the Pharisees in Matthew 23. He said, they bind heavy burdens, hard to bear, and lay them on men's shoulders, but they themselves will not move them with one of their fingers. So you can see they had lost the whole idea that this is a day of rest, because after the Sabbath, keeping it like that, you needed a rest. It became easier to work for 6 days than to rest on one day. So remember the Sabbath. Remember what it's for. Remember why it's done.
That's Skip Heitzig with a message about learning to relax. You won't want to miss what Skip has to say next time about adopting regular practical steps in your week to encourage rest. Remember, our society is often quick to encourage the premise that he who dies with the most toys wins. This false philosophy leads to overwork, super stress, and a lack of quality time for family. We'll continue this important message on our next broadcast of Connect with Skip Heitzig. Now, Let's look at our current resource offer.
Does the thought of studying the Bible on your own seem overwhelming or maybe even intimidating? We want to help you open up God's Word with confidence anywhere and any day, and hopefully every day. Here's Skip Heitzig.
And yet, like all of us, we struggle with certain parts of it. We have trouble with certain parts of the Bible. Sometimes it's tough. But exposure to the Bible, a consistent exposure to the Bible, and I would add on a daily basis, with the consistent desire to obey it, will do more for you than any other thing that I can think of in your Christian walk.
Take the mystery out of studying Scripture with Pastor Skip's book, How to Study the Bible and Enjoy It. Our thanks to you when you give $25 or more to help connect more people with this Bible teaching ministry. Get the tips and tools you need to open your eyes, mind, and heart to God's truth.
You don't have to be afraid of the Bible.
Get your copy of How to Study the Bible and Enjoy It today when you give online securely at connectwithskip.com/offer or call 800-922-1888.
To receive your package, call now 1-800-922-1888 or check in at connectwithskip.com. That is 1-800-922-1888 or check in at connectwithskip.com. And remember, when you order resources from this ministry, any extra finances you provide will help us to continue to expand our reach of these Bible messages. And join us next time for more Bible teaching from Skip Heitzig. Thanks for joining us on Connect with Skip Heitzig. We're connecting you to God's never-changing truth in ever-changing times. This program is brought to you by Connection Communications.